Welcome back to Madam Crossing New Horizons. I'm dear darling. As we see what's going on a lovely island of Fawnhallow today in a late night episode, of course, because D&D was today. It was a very interesting session. This is a group 2 session. Where they're on a sort of... I'm not going to give spoilers, and I guess I'll give warnings before I give spoilers, I suppose, if you are someone from a session watching. But yeah, I mean, I said about it before, they're in a much more sort of like low-key section, I suppose, of D&D character arcs, not character arcs, story arcs and all that. They had a very intense moment. Now we're having a bit of a wind down. But anyway, good evening, everyone. Right now in Fawnhallow, it's 11:34 PM on Monday, May 13th, 2024. Oh, Biscuit's birthday. Happy birthday. I don't know if Biscuit's still asleep or not, but we can at least find out. But yeah, they're basically going through a section which is meant to be quite puzzly, if anything. There was a fight, though, to be fair, in this one. They're basically just going through a dungeon, because I was like, let's have a bit of a change of a pace, let's drop some lore in, let's have something which is a bit of a breather, let's give them a bit of room to, instead of like focus wholly on like whatever the plot's going on, let them focus on the characters a bit more, let them like puzzle stuff out a bit more, and build more about the world. At least that's a general concept. So there's a lot of like dungeon-esque rooms here. It's a little bit trolly, I will say. I can't exactly say why without revealing, I suppose, the premise behind the dungeon, or why necessarily some of the things are designed the way are. I'm not going to say not every single room was a troll. There were definitely some troll rooms, though. One of them was kind of more, not so much a troll room, but more like a test-esque troll. But it was one I took actually from Z Bradshaw, who is a D&D YouTuber and animator, and I like saw this video that he did. I can't remember when it was exactly, and I was like, that is a brilliant concept for a puzzle. So I was like, let's do that. But it's basically, I can't remember what it's called. Is it called like, he's got a great video on it, and I'm sure he did it much better than I did. The countdown puzzle, that's what it's called. But the general concept is that they're in a room, they're locked in it, and then there's a button, and then they press a button, and then a countdown basically starts from whatever. I did 24. And you just basically emphasize it, but like things feel like it's going to kick off, like if they don't do something, like put them in like a state of panic, but make sure that the button is incredibly prominent, because then they sort of, then you think about this is very meta talk, I suppose, behind the scenes. They think about the idea of like, what do I do? I'm going to press a button again, and I press the button, resets a timer, and basically the only thing you have to do, it's kind of like the r/button from Reddit, that April Fool's thing they did ages ago. The only thing you have to do to get out of the room is wait for the button to count down all the way to 0, and then nothing bad actually happens. It's just a complete fake out. Really, it's, I suppose, a test of patience, if anything. Why is it a test of patience? Well, it just kind of is. And I just really liked that puzzle idea, and I remember when I watched that animation, I was like, maybe when I play D&D someday, it'd be really cool to have like this puzzle interwoven in, and I thought this was a decent time to put it in. And I can't necessarily explain why. It's not like the strongest connection in the world, it's not like this is a guaranteed, this was very much me sort of like finding this really cool idea for a puzzle, and then being like, all right, let's interweave it into the dungeon. But it's a very puzzle heavy dungeon in general, I would say. Where it starts out a bit easier, I think, and then now I'm sort of like getting to the stages where I'm like asking of them more directly to be like, okay, now you got to actually like think about more laterally about this, because the first one was very sort of, it wasn't technically open-ended, but like I suppose to actually enter the dungeon they had to basically put candles either side to show worship kind of to it, and the second one was like lower yourself in the presence of gods, and then they had to basically literally sort of bow down in front of a door and before letting it in. So those were much more sort of like easy ones. I think it was very obvious what you had to do once they saw the sort of like, each of them came with like a phrase which you had to do. And the third one was meant to be, I mean, this is a dungeon if you want to run it yourself, I suppose. The third one was wasn't so much meant to be as difficult a puzzle as it was more meant to be like a signifying point of like, hey, this is a way to start talking about your characters. Because it's a thing, when I'm fine saying this because it's something I spoke about them with afterwards. It's like, everyone's got like really cool characters. They got like a cool character story and that sort of thing, where like they've got these ideas, etc. And one thing about playing D&D is like, you want people to know your character story, right? Like that's kind of a point. There's no point of making a story and then no one hears it, right? Kind of like if a tree falls in wood and no one's around to hear it, doesn't make a sound. the ultimate goal of playing your character is for the other characters to eventually know your character, and then you eventually like go on a story arc with your character. At least if you're like much more character focused. If you're not character focused, then so be it. But and I was saying to them that like I wanted to give them a way which made it easier to be like, hey, this is like a jumping off point to talk about it, because a lot of them have like quite difficult past these characters, which makes it difficult to just like, you're not going to bring it up randomly, especially because if a lot of these characters are actually quite guarded, and none of these characters are really like open books or anything, which does make it difficult, I think, to facilitate that sort of conversation in the first place. So I'm just like, okay, let me give you a diving off point. Let me give you a simplistic puzzle where it was basically a mirror. There were some things mirrored in the room, but one of the things was in reflection that wasn't in the room itself, and it turns out that if you put it on, you saw a reflection of yourself, and you see the door and you see the exit. That's basically what it was. I'm not going to go into more details about what the items were necessarily, what they or why it was chosen to be designed in this particular way, but that's basically it. There's an item in the reflection which does not exist in real life. I also had like a load of other items which are sort of scattered around the place that if they interacted with real life, it did not move in reflection, to really sort of hone in the idea of like, hey, something's up with these items. Well, obviously they know that something's up with the items, but it gives them a very clear indication this is not the item you're meant to interact with. At least that's my idea when I was thinking about the puzzle. But in my case, there was a black veil, which was in the reflection, which wasn't in real life. They put it on, they saw their backstory, essentially, which now gave it a jumping off point, because they could all react to it. They can all be like, oh, I saw my backstory, that means they must have seen their backstory. Now next time they have a conversation, which fortunately did happen, they can start to talk about that. And because they're at a stage where the characters do trust each other, they've been adventuring for a while. It's amazingly been less than a week, but they've been through some big stuff, I suppose, together. And really, I suppose, because it's meant to be reasonably early in most of our like adventuring cycles, it's kind of like a first true confidant that they can confide in, right? At least that's the motivation behind that one. So there you go, people. If you're playing in the game, you can see behind the curtain, behind the veil. That was very much, I mean, I said it to them, it was very much the main motivation of that room was to get them talking about their character. The fourth one was that timer puzzle from Z Bradshaw. It's really funny. I thought it was just funny just to put like a much more subversive in, because the first three ones all like required a lot of intense thinking. With fourth one, it's super easy. Literally, how do you solve it? You don't do anything. You push a button, that's it. You're done. The fifth one was the fight, wasn't it? I think so. I'm not sure if I skipped out a room here or not. No, the fifth one was a riddle. This one I was a bit more iffy on, to be perfectly honest, because I wanted to do a riddle, but I was like, I've literally done like puzzles for all these other things. How am I gonna make this riddle interesting? So I was like, okay, well, for reasons, it needs to be quite like it needs to probably be the hardest puzzle or the hardest riddle that they come across. And I was like, I don't know, maybe they actually will solve it, maybe they actually won't. But the riddle basically goes that how I set it up was, it was a door which was locked, and there's an orb, they touch the orb, and injected into their mind is basically the concept of a riddle, the idea of a riddle, which is there are two sticks, both of them are 12 meters long, and they're upright and they're a certain distance away from each other. I tie a rope 16 meters long to the top of each stick, such that the lowest part of a rope hangs down and is 4 meters off the ground. How far apart are the two sticks? Now, your initial reaction is, if you try and draw it out, you might draw like something which looks like a suspension bridge or like a U shape or something, where the two sticks vertically upwards and then the rope hanging in between, and then you might try and diagram it out. And then you go like, oh, this is like, do I need to do maths to work it out? And I'm going to tell you right now, spoilers, no you don't, because the maths actually for that sort of thing is actually quite difficult. It's not the easiest thing to do. I guess you'd have to like find the length of a parabolic arc, is my guess, which is not really the easiest thing to do, and very much is something which I guess is a bit of a meta element here. I would not expect my players to know how to do. I would not even know off the top of my head how to work that out necessarily, because it is actually genuinely quite difficult to work out. It requires some decent maths knowledge. But I suppose this is where like a bit of meta play comes to in, which is why I was fine with giving this riddle. Is if you get given this riddle, there's no shot, there is no way unless your DM is terrible, your DM expects you to be able to get that, unless you are playing to like a group of mathematicians or something. I'm like the only mathematician in my friend, no, one of two mathematicians in my friend group, but the only one in this D&D session at least. So of course there's no chance that I wanted it. So, I mean, from there you can go for a meta level, okay, then this is something that the DM, me, dear darling, expects us to be able to work out. And from there, it's, you know, hard to necessarily think about how you might solve it. I wanted to give them a chance to see if they would try and solve it, because I feel like my expectation was like, from a meta perspective, there's no way that I would try and give you like an actual mathematical thing, so either there's a really easy way to solve it or there's an obvious answer. In this case, there's actually a very obvious answer, and I let them basically discover it, well, because I thought it was actually quite a clever solution, which I didn't think of, spoilers behind the curtain, I looked behind the curtain, was that their characters made a model, essentially, of a riddle in real life. And I was like, that's a really interesting way to go about it, and it feels very like on brand, like in character in a sense, because the problem with these sort of puzzle and riddle things is, which is why I'm probably not going to run like many of them, like only if I hear a particularly good one, is there's always a discrepancy between you as a person who's able to solve a puzzle and your character. You know, a discrepancy if you're like bad at riddles but your character is amazing at riddles, then how do you like reconcile that? Like, you can't, like, you go like, oh, my character's meant to be great at riddles but I'm not good at riddles, so I don't understand this. And the way you really solve that, as I understand from reading, is the most common thing is basically doing an intelligence check. I will give your character a hint that they would naturally probably think of, which is I was going to do, but I also was like, I'm not going to try and take this opportunity of stealing away this chance of solving this riddle for you. If you want to do, that's it. But they actually just came up with a very genuinely clever, I think, idea about it, because this was a practical riddle. This could practically be made, so they were just like, can we try and make the thing from like what supplies we have? And I was like, if you have rope and if you have stick and if you have a way of measuring them, then yes, I would say so. And they came up with it and they made it, and I basically sort of reconstructed it in real life. That was like improvised. I was like, okay, let's find a ruler. I got a ruler, and I used my laptop charging cable as a rope, and I demonstrated it to them what we discovered. That, spoiler alert, the two sticks need to be on top of each other. There needs to be no distance between them, because a 60-meter rope, folded in half, hanging down, can only reach a maximum length of 8 meters. And at the top of a rope, if a stick is 12 meters long, that means for it to hang 4 meters off the ground, it needs to be hanging directly downwards. So the two sticks are on top of each other. And it's a riddle I saw ages ago. It's like a sort of mathematical, puzzly sort of trick thing. Because it like set it up and then it gave out these two things, and it was basically like try and solve it. And I was like, that's a really like clever subversion, because it's a riddle or puzzle which seems like I'm going to need so much maths to be able to solve this. This feels impossible. But if you give up that quickly, then you'll never like take the time to suppose think about it and be like, hey, maybe the answer is actually simpler than it may seem. And the answer is just like, they're just on top of each other like that. So yeah, and then the next one was just a straight up fight. Like, I was just like, okay, I can't have puzzle, or exploration over and over again. Let's have like exploration, puzzle, and then let's have a bit of combat in here. And I thought I would throw them a bit more of a fun enemy, which is a gelatinous cube. It's a very silly enemy, which engulfs parties or tries to engulf people, and then tries to dissolve you if it can. I did a bit of ruler cooling, because one of the party members had telekinetic to that when every time they got swallowed up, they could like shove the cube off them, which I don't think is actually rules. I don't think it's technically allowed, but I was like, that's like a clever enough solution that I would allow it. Because I think technically if you do that psychic shove, you should still be inside the cube and you get shoved along with them. But I didn't really intend for it to be like a particularly difficult encounter or anything. It was just meant to be break up the monotony with a bit of fight. So they fought a gelatinous cube. Gelatinous cube, as I found out while I was looking at its stat block, is actually hidden if it doesn't move. Oh, I didn't give you anything. I gave you a coconut. Wait, what if I give you a star fragment? Do you like star fragments? I don't know. I don't know if you constitute it as a rare. Oh, I can't give you a star fragment. 99 weeds. What if I just give you a coconut, huh? No worries. Anyway, happy birthday, Biscuit. yeah, so that was that one, and it was basically just like they go into a room, and then there's a perception check to see if they can actually spot the thing. They do spot. I didn't want to give it away entirely. I didn't want to be like, oh, there's a gelatinous cube, because that's not fun, is it? Like, as a thing with D&D is, you got to find the right balance, because of course rolling and the only outcome is being success and failure means that sometimes a lot of the fun gets lost. Like, it wouldn't be fun if I was like, oh, you see a gelatinous cube there. So I was like, okay, I tell them explicitly, you know for sure something is off, something is weird about this entire area around the centre of the room, but you're not exactly sure why or what. And it's up to them to discover how. And I actually thought they were going to basically discover it before anything really happened. Is one of my players was like, I'm going to throw a playing card into it. And I was like, that's actually really clever. So I described a playing card basically like flying through the air, then hitting where the cube was, and it just like slowing down dramatically. As a hint of like, something's very strange there. And then another player was like, is it magical? I can't check. And they were like, I'm pretty sure it's not magical, because I don't think the gelatinous cube is magical. And yeah, from there I was actually thinking that, oh, they're actually probably going to discover it's a cube of slime. And they did say it was like some sort of weird jelly thing probably. But, you know, they were going to fight it anyway, like, why not? So they did end up fighting it, and then, you know, defeating it, you can do whatever you want to get the progress to the next level. And then the one after that, and I thought this was a silly fun one. Again, I can't say why necessarily this room is like this, but it was basically an exact copy of a room they just left, with the same sort of weird distortion around the centre, to give the impression that there is another gelatinous cube. But this time, there is actually no gelatinous cube. It's just an illusion. So this time when they chuck something in, which I'm not sure if they actually picked up on or not, or they might have forgotten or not. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. There's a lot of information which one of my friends was like, because I basically just said, like, in a throwaway line, oh, I mentioned a basement for this person's house, and then one of the players picked up on it. I was like, let's explore the basement. And he was like, was that actually like a genuine thing or not? Like, was that meant to be a genuine clue? And I was like, yes, sometimes I throw in if you're paying attention, small clues here and there, such that if you pick them up and if you notice them, you'd be like, hey, that doesn't add up, or like, oh, that was a bit of a weird thing, and it can clue you into more of a story. I don't expect them to pick on all of them, because that's just too much, and you can't be suspicious of literally everything, but it's like a nice little tidbit, for if they do or not. How many of them they picked up on? A decent amount, I would say. Not all of them, though. Some have flown under the radar. Anyway, this is one I wasn't actually sure if they flew under the radar or not, but one of them chucked basically a lit up rock into the middle, just to try and illuminate everything, and I described it as just sort of plonking along the ground. It did not get any slowdown whatsoever, because there's no cube there. But they did assign it as an illusion through investigation rolls and their own assumptions, to be honest. And basically, that entire room was an illusion. So, like, there was no actual threat. The door wasn't even locked, because the door was an illusion. The only thing, it was basically a big old prank. The only thing is, there was a small pit on the other side of the door, but it wasn't even, it wouldn't have even damaged him. It would just have been, like, embarrassing, if anything. And then the final room, it's not the actual final room, but the room that they've made it up to is a rest room, essentially. I wanted them to be able to just take a breather, have like a fun moment, because you notice there's sort of like these break rooms scattered throughout to sort of like break up the bits and pieces. Like the room for patients was like deceivingly felt like it was going to be really intense, but it actually wasn't, because basically nothing happened. They actually just got a buff, if anything. They got temporary hit points. And then this room was the proper rest room, where it's literally just a tree with fruits on it, and if you eat the fruits, you hallucinate. Essentially, you look into, well, the astral sea, technically, the astral plane, but in my world it's called the astral sky. That's basically it. It's just like a breather for them personally. Obviously I can't tell what the other rooms, the feature rooms, are going to be, but you know, we're laying down some foundations of what's going on, because throughout this entire dungeon they're basically finding extracts from the diary of the person who created this dungeon, this temple, as a tribute to the deities in my world. This, I guess, is a spoiler, I suppose, if you are one of the people in the campaign session. Did they find all the diary extracts? No, they didn't. They were harder to find. Well, the first one is actually not that difficult, but the earlier ones meant to be harder to find, because they actually give away some of the parts of the clues of later things, and they had to do certain things to actually like properly find them. And the other ones, I sort of, you know, if they got a good enough investigation role, they'd find it. Because I think it's difficult to ask explicitly about something necessarily to investigate and think that something might be there. But there you go, there's dungeon design. The next ones are interesting. I'm trying to think what's next. One of them, the next two are puzzles I stole from the internet because I thought they were interesting ideas. They look like short form puzzles which were decisive and to the point. One of them I think will be quite funny. I think I'll hate it. And the other one I think is actually quite a nice. It's quite a nice sort of puzzle design. And then there's two more rooms which I will not say anything about. So for now, I'm going to wrap episode of dungeon design, I guess. If you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've been Dear Darling. Likes, comments, subscription, shares greatly appreciated. Socials, Discord down below. Hope to see each other again. But for now, it's our farewell. So until next time. Bye bye for now.